Hey everyone, and welcome to Voices of Veritas, a podcast made by the church for the church. I'm Ryan Hennigan.
And I'm Michael Bashaw. At Veritas Community Church, we believe that the gospel of Jesus Christ is at work in and through us, transforming all things.
On Voices of Veritas, you will hear real stories of gospel transformation, spiritual insights, and heartfelt conversations that seek to encourage us as we follow Jesus.
We invite you to join us twice a month to listen, learn, and grow in faith together.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Voices of Veritas podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Hennigan, and I am joined with my co-host, Michael Bashaw. Michael, how are you today?
I'm doing good, Ryan. I feel like I have a slightly more baritone voice today. I don't know if you noticed that. I'm draining or allergies or something, so I'm going to get that good resonance today.
Yeah, the mellifluous tones are really coming through.
Yes.
I like it. Well, on today's podcast, we will be talking about the young adults ministry here at the Short North, otherwise known as YAM, as well as what it means to be a deacon within the church. And to do just that, we're joined today by Jess Lindaberry, formerly Griffin.
Yes.
You nailed that, didn't I?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
And so, Jess, why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself?
Like you said, my name is Jess Lindaberry, newly Lindaberry, recently married just about a year ago. So I'm so grateful for that. I lead the young adults ministry, and then tangentially, I'm the deacon of young adults ministry here at Veritas. I am coming up on 4 years here at the church, and it's been such a blessing and an answered prayer. I recently moved with my husband. We moved up to Sunbury, so a lot more trees. I was a city slicker for almost 15 years, and so now I see a lot more trees and I see stars. And I think those are the most recent fun things about me. Recently married and recently moved.
Are you from Columbus, originally?
Not originally. I'm from a smaller town called Springfield, Ohio. It's about an hour west of Columbus. So
I didn't know that. I am also from Springfield.
Are you really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, small world.
What high school did you go to?
Northeastern High School.
Okay, I went to Shawnee High School.
Nice.
So
okay.
Yeah, and then I moved to Columbus to go to Ohio State.
Okay.
So I just never left. Fell in love with it.
Sweet. What did you study at OSU?
I studied fashion merchandising and business.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
So very specific.
Yes.
And that's what I work in vocationally. I am a merchant. I work in merchandising. It basically means similar to a buyer, but I pick out the products that are sold in stores for our customers. So
what store do you work for?
I work at Bath and Body Works.
Okay.
So for their home office. So I'm picking out the formulas that we sell in stores across the world, actually.
So when you say the formulas, are you talking like the actual, the soap?
The goop inside.
Yes,
yeah. So
that's
I do,
pretty cool.
Yeah, the body care. So the body creams and lotions and the fragrances and the new things that we're bringing out. If there's a brand new formula, I'm hopefully right on trend, and I'm bringing it out about the same time the market is. So
wow.
Yeah, it's very fun. It makes me seem more scientific, more chemistry driven than I am, but I just want everybody to know I don't actually do the formulating. I just have a team of people who can formulate. I just ask them, I just say, this is what's going to be trending. Will you please help me to formulate this? So
do you get a lot of free samples?
All the time. Yeah. We've got, my home is full of Bath and Body Works, everything, candles to soaps, and then obviously a lot of body care.
Yes.
What are your favorite fragrances? If you had to wear a fragrance, what would it be? What would you smell like if you could?
Oh, this is an interesting question.
Yeah.
So I'm going to answer this in two parts.
Okay.
First part is, I would say my favorite cologne to wear if I'm going to dress up and actually put in a lot of effort, it would be Polo. The blue Polo.
Classic.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
But I've also I don't know if I can pinpoint a specific fragrance. When you asked me the question, I thought about the times I've been to the Candle Lab, which I think has a new name now. But you can pick out your own fragrances and everything. I would always go for the Dad's Den tobacco pipe smell with a little bit of bourbon and vanilla.
Yeah.
So if you could make that a fragrance for a man, that'd be great.
Okay. We might have something similar, but we do have a coffee and whiskey. We have a leather and brandy. We have something called Vanilla Noir, which has hints of vanilla. Very good.
I find it interesting that as we were sitting here kind of talking about your vocation, you're finding out what the trends are and you're trying to meet the trends, or I don't know if it's fair to say almost beat them before they hit the market.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But that kind of segues in well, I think, to the young adults ministry, right? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but when you said you've been at Veritas for almost 4 years now, prior to you coming here, I don't think there was such a thing as a young adults ministry.
That is correct.
So can you tell us just a little bit about what young adults ministry is? I mean, obviously it's for young adults, but like what's the age group? How did it get started? Just give us some background.
Yeah. So, I mean, at face value, the young adults group is people in their 20s, most literally young adults, typically 20s or early 30s, who go to Veritas. It's typically our target group. And the goal is to gather people who are in that life stage to come together to build fellowship and to be equipped and to help them engage more in their local church. I think that it's really important to show young adults practically what it looks like to be engaged, especially in a church like Veritas, because some of them, we don't know what their backgrounds are. They all have differing faith journeys, but I think just the earlier in their lives, their adult lives, that they can get plugged in, that they can find out what their gifts are, that they can start serving, that they can get plugged in with community, the better. And so young adults ministries in general, there's a lot more that are popping up all over the country, but they are still newer. And when people look into kind of what is the reasoning behind why haven't these always existed, it's just kind of a sign of the culture where people are getting married later, they're having kids later, the priorities just aren't the same. And so there is kind of this new stage of life that didn't really exist as much 30, 40, 50 years ago, this young adult age group. And so now I think as a church, the capital C church, it's coming together to figure out how do you equip that age group, that life stage of people, which can be really hard because a lot of people, like I said, if they're not getting married or if they're moving to a new city and they maybe don't have that same community or they're kind of doing it, quote unquote, alone or kind of more on their own, it could be a really hard stage of life, transitioning out of either high school or college and getting a job for the first time. It's there can be a lot of pressures and a lot of unknowns. And so, that's really what young adults group is. It's how can we come alongside them when they're in that life stage. It came about because I came looking for a local church that I could join with the passion of starting a young adults ministry. I've held that passion for quite a few years now for a plethora of different reasons, but I have just always had a heart for young adults. I came to know the Lord when I was a young adult. I was a senior in college. I was 21 years old and felt like the Lord saved me out of a life of just being wayward and just seeking the world. And once I sought all the world and kind of got it, I realized there was really nothing. It was vanity, just as like we have been studying in Ecclesiastes. Mm-hmm. And so that pivotal moment coming in by young adulthood and then going through that really gave me a heart to, like I said, walk alongside other young adults in that same season. And so I'd been going to Veritas for probably 6 to 8 months, and I approached some of the pastors and said, hey, I'm ready. I'm a member here now. I am trying to get to know this place, but do I have your encouragement? Do I have your blessing to start connecting with other people who might want to buy into this vision and then eventually, just kickstart this ministry? And it was truly met with a lot of positivity and encouragement and support to go out and do that. And so it started as what I would call a grassroots ministry. I just went to my community group first to say, hey, anybody in this group, is anybody excited about this idea? And I got some excitement. And so we started meeting just at my house, just praying and vision casting for what something like this could be. After a couple months of that, I realized that we had kind of talked about planning, and it was turning into a lot of, well, what if this happens? And if this happens, we can do this and we can do this. And realized that without actually gathering the young adults, it was just hard to know what their needs were. And so we decided to just start meeting and start figuring it out from there. And, I think it was August of 2022. That's really when the official young adults meetings started, and we started calling it Young Adults Ministry. And another member, Nate Arnold, I'm pretty sure he was the one who coined. He just started calling it YAM. He just started saying young adults ministry is too long to type. Let's just call it YAM. And affectionately, that's just the name that has stuck around. So those were our humble beginnings.
That's fascinating that you kind of just took the onus on yourself. I mean, before we were recording, you and I were talking about, different volunteer type projects and how the ones that are typically successful are the ones that aren't necessarily being, foisted on you as an ask. It's your passion, it's your idea, and to hear that the Lord kind of has just put that on your heart for a long time now, and then that you just ran with it is really, really quite something. Yeah. So thanks for all that you do.
Oh, thank you. It's very much the Lord in me. Perhaps I'm biased, but it's definitely the most fun ministry to run, and so I feel like I got lucky. I got blessed that I get this passion. It's the most fun one.
You talk about your intention and having that passion. It seems like that was pretty clear for you.
Yeah.
Even before coming to Veritas. Mm-hmm. I would love to hear how that passion was like cultivated in you.
Mm-hmm. I think that as I look back in my walk over the last 10 plus years with the Lord, I think the Lord has been very kind to me to just very slowly show me where my passions lie and where my gifts lie and really where he wants me to run in those things. And so there's just a plethora of things that I've walked through that just continually validated my passion for young adult. First, like I said, coming to know the Lord at that age group and just the struggles, obstacles I walked through at that age is what gave me a heart for that age group specifically. I took a missions trip when I was in my early 20s, still a newer Christian, and I remember thinking, I'm going to go to Central America and I'm going to bring the gospel to all these people who've never heard it. They're going to be so thankful. They're going to ask me to stay and I'm going to have to tell them no. And, a lot of humility lessons there too. But I remember going there to a third world country and being so convicted how strong the faith was of these people who were spiritually so rich, yet physically so poor. And seeing these people who had dirt floors and one twin bed for a family of 7 in a small shack on the side of a volcano, and then be so content and grateful in their life because they knew they had Jesus. And then contrasting that to the corporate world that I work in and the rich country of the United States that I work in, where everybody was honestly more physically rich, especially compared to these people, but spiritually poor. And, I felt that the Lord took me on a missions trip across the world to show me that my real mission was here in Columbus. And so, wherever my sphere of influence was, I just decided that was where my ministry was going to be. And so that was, at that time I was surrounded by young adults. So just another kind of validation of that. And then as I continued to I hopped around some churches. I became part of a church plant on the south side of Columbus with some friends. And when we were planting that church, I think our heart was, we need to read the Bible. We need to know the Bible in and out, because if we want to plant a biblical church, we need to know exactly what the Bible says. And that was one of the first times that I read and understood the Bible as a Christian and in such a deep way. And I think it made me realize how important biblical literacy is in general to Christians and to churches, and how it was almost a lost art, I would say, in some of modern and American Christianity. And so the validation of young adults, the validation of being in mission on Columbus, the validation of just having a heart for people to know the Bible and know it deeply. And also, as I planted a church, seeing the biblical layout of what a church should be and seeing people really coming alongside each other, loving one another, having elders and shepherds and pastors and teachers, and the church being a place where believers get to come together to be equipped and learn the word and serve one another. And I just felt like all of those kind of came to a head, and I started to learn about more young adults ministries that were out there. And then listening to them and following them, I decided I wanted to plant one. But at the time, I was at more of a new church plant, and anybody who's been a part of a church plant kind of knows that when you're a part of it, you wear no less than 17 hats at any certain time. And so the church I was at, I was helping with house churches. I was helping plant house churches and helping with those leaders. I was helping with the women's ministry and plan those events. I was volunteering in the kids group and volunteering, here or there. And I just felt that I really wanted to pursue a more established church that had some of those things already covered so that I could have a very specific focus, because I felt that I could be most effective in that way. And so, funny enough, I went to a young adults conference in Texas. And I had a friend who worked for a young adults ministry in Texas. And I remember asking some of the leaders at the conference, I want so badly to find and plant into a biblical church in Columbus. And funny enough, the worship leader at that conference was from Columbus, Ohio. And he was able to connect me with his brother, who gave me a couple great options. And he said, I think you should try out Veritas Community Church. And I looked it up on the map, and it was less than 5 minutes away from the house that I had just purchased, that I had prayerfully purchased as a hope to do ministry in and, gather people in. And so I came to Veritas with the hope that they would be a biblical church that would let me plant a young adults ministry. I met with Chris McConaughey one of my first weeks. I came with a list of theological questions to try to make sure that they were as biblically sound and literate as I wanted them to be. And I made sure to let them know that first meeting what my heart was for young adults ministry.
I mean, I was just struck by your devotion to it. I mean, like going to conferences in different states and really being willing to try out different churches and seek advice and seek guidance and counsel. And like how you said earlier, that God kind of had to take you to a different part of the world to remind you like what you needed right here in your hometown or right here where you were.
Yeah, I'm also struck by the fact that you bought a house that Veritas ended up being 5 minutes away.
Yeah.
You were connected through Veritas, basically through Texas.
Yeah.
And just the way that if you are, considering God and praying to make the right decisions, to follow in the steps that he has for you, that he's way ahead of you. And the fact that like you made that decision to buy the house and then go to the conference, and that was all like preordained in a sense, that he was working through you and the decisions you were making. And then I know the leaders here at Veritas talk a lot about how they pray for the church to grow, but for people to come to the church with specific gifts and visions.
Yes.
I think you used the word vision casting earlier, which I really liked. And that just is another encouraging example of how we could be praying for something here at Veritas that we have no idea what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
But God is directing the right people into the church.
Yeah.
And so that's just, I don't know, that I felt pretty encouraged when you were sharing your story there, just knowing that he's got it all figured out.
And we as a church just came off of doing a rhythm series. And as you're talking, I just hear all the 5 rhythms kind of just come out, right? It's like obviously mission, obviously service, and then your comments about biblical literacy and how it's kind of a lost art, and you just wanted to have that. It's like there's learning, and all the others are there too. But I just find it fascinating that, as Michael said, you had to go to Texas and figure out that Veritas was here 5 minutes from where you were living, and it's really what all those 5 rhythms were, everything you were looking for.
Yeah.
And it's everything part of the YAM ministry.
God really delights in answering prayers like that, praying to find a biblical church, praying to start a young adults ministry. I think it just goes to show that when we are praying in line with his will, he's really delighting to give us these things. And it was a years-long prayer too. And like you said, Michael, just seeing the Lord, looking back and reflecting, he was absolutely just orchestrating all of those steps. And I think such a beautiful gift that I just got, he went before me. Yeah, we meet 2 times a month, and a YAM gathering is, some parts fellowship, some parts equipping. And so the first hour we have fellowship, which is really just sharing a meal. So, like I mentioned, young adults in this stage are more often single than they were, decades ago. And to me, it's important to make sure that people can build that community in with people who have more time than them, because, as people get married, especially as they have kids, your time just somehow starts to dwindle, And so we make sure that we have time for fellowship. And then the second part is always equipping. So we kind of stand on, we want to, as YAM, help equip young adults at Veritas to know God, know God's word, and know God's people deeper through worshiping, through communing, and through equipping them. And so we try to use that second hour to equip on one of those three facets, knowing God, God's word, or God's people in a deeper way. And so equipping can be a myriad of different things. It really, we try to lean on the Lord a lot on what are the topics, what are the equipping. So we will do anything from just a message, kind of similar to a sermon, but typically with more discussion. I love allowing the young adults to discuss and ask questions. And, there's just such brilliant minds and just ideas and thoughts and different perspectives. So we try to make sure that people have the time to do that. So sometimes it's just a discussion or going through a chapter of the Bible. Sometimes we will do prayer and worship nights. Every time we do one, I think we should do even more of those too. And then other times we will spend time with people within the church. And so we brought in all of the pastors for pastor panels, or at least most of the pastors. And that is a really, really great opportunity for the young adults to get to know the pastors in the church in a deeper way. Because again, I want the young adults to be deeply involved in the local church. I want them to know their pastors and elders. I want them to feel like they can reach out to them with questions or for counsel. And I also really want the pastors to be able to know the young adults that are here and to see what we're doing. And so those are always really widely attended, which is very fun. And then other times we do something fun. It just depends what the young adults are asking to do as well. We're currently in a Hot Topics series, which has been so fun. What we're doing is we're taking topics that are, quote unquote, hot topics and culture and talking about them from a biblical lens. And it's not necessarily what do we think about this or what does culture say, but more so biblically, what does the Bible say about these things? And then trying to ask more practical questions, which has been wonderful. We did LGBT, we did women in church leadership. We recently came off an abortion, IVF, and surrogacy, where really the goal is just to try to, be able to talk in a safe space for people to share, this is what I have a question about. This is what I hear in culture, people kind of standing against something like this. And then we'll try to ask really practical questions so that we can, make it something that people might be engaging with on a daily or weekly or monthly basis. And so,
see, that is so intriguing to me. Like, as you're talking, I'm getting goosebumps because those are the kind of things that I very much am passionate about is the practicality of when you engage culture from a Christian worldview. How do you do it, especially around topics that are so divisive and controversial? And I think it's great that you guys are just kind of diving headlong into that. And it kind of connects with what you said earlier, I think, about just this kind of cultural moment that the United States was having, but really a lot of countries around the West are kind of having this revival of Christianity, especially like the Gen Z generation. And even after that, I know I heard like reports this past Easter of thousands of people in France getting baptized, which is fascinating because France is 99% atheist. But
praise God.
Right. But also like here in America, obviously there's just been massive revival from the Gen Z kind of population. And I think that that's encouraging. But to your point, like we want to make sure that those roots take root and that they look at things through a biblical lens rather than just like what culture is trying to tell them. But I do think that we're starting to see this wall of culture and Christianity. Like, when I was younger, people would always say like, you can't talk about religion or politics at a party. You're starting to see that wall kind of come down. And I think it's because people are so hungry for truth, which is, that sounds cliche to say, but I think that that's honest. But they're also just hungry for something concrete, because everything in this culture is so relativistic and your truth, my truth, and this is never right or wrong. And I think people are starting to wake up to, no, there is rights and there are wrongs, and we need to kind of be able to sit on something. And so I really like how you've kind of just dove into that as a group.
I agree with you, Ryan. And young adults, I guess I include all of us in that to some extent. But in young adults and Gen Z in particular, it can go on TikTok or Google or ChatGPT and find information super quickly in a way that 50 years ago we couldn't do at all, basically. And so I think the point I'm trying to make is that to have a space where young adults can ask direct questions about hot topics is wonderful, because the approach of, like Ryan said, maybe we don't talk about these things at a party, or even in Christian culture, 30 or 40 years ago, where there were just things you did not talk about. We don't live in that time anymore. Topics that might be uncomfortable or divisive actually need to be addressed head on, of course, in a kind, loving, and truthful way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that clarity is kindness. And I think that especially as Christians, we really should know the truth. And I think that goes back to biblical literacy and me being so passionate about it. But as church leaders, and as, myself being in church leadership, I think it's important for whoever we're shepherding to feel like they can come and ask questions. And if something is confusing, I want to be able to bring clarity. And I also want to hold that open-handedly. I am, I go through everything carefully with my husband before we are presenting it. For a lot of these hot topics, I've reached out to the pastors just to let, say, this is what we're going through. Here are some key points. Just want to let you know. And, especially for these hot topic series, I also try not to come in with a super hard stamp of this is exactly what I think, but more so opening up the conversation. And then hopefully by the end, they can kind of see where I fall biblically. But again, my encouragement to them every time is, if you have a position, please bring scripture along with you. And I think that is really important.
Well, with your hey, please bring scripture with you, what you're doing is helping them learn how to think. And to Michael's point a minute ago about nowadays, there's so much raw information at your hands. But I think with AI especially, the danger is it's telling you how to think. It's not just giving you data and you're synthesizing it. It is pulling certain sources for you and is telling you what you should think about certain things. And that's not anti-technology or anti-AI or anything like that, but just in general, critical thinking has been something that even I have really struggled with. And I say even I, not because I should be better at it, but because I don't think about it until somebody asks me why I hold the opinions that I hold. So when we are confronted with some of these kind of hot topics, right, and the whys behind why we hold what we believe, that's where you have to develop those critical thinking skills. And so for you to kind of lead the charge in saying, hey, we need to have some kind of biblical basis for this, or some kind of citation or something, so that we can at least discuss it from, again, a Christian worldview, and not just well, I feel this or I think that. So I really find that super important.
So how is the ministry going? You said it's been 2 years or 3 years now?
3 years, yeah.
3 years. How is it going, and how has it evolved from your original maybe idea of what it was going to be? What were some unexpected changes to your vision, or problems that came up? I would just love to know about how things have evolved as you've started and continued the ministry.
Yeah. One thing that comes to mind is that the people who were coming were not baby Christians who needed to just learn the structure of the Bible, and not that I assumed that I would be teaching everybody how to read the Bible, but I think I realized early on that the body within Veritas and young adults in general are hungry, especially Christian young adults are just hungry for, like you guys said, the truth. And they are much more biblically literate than other generations, I would even say. And so it pushed me as a leader in a lot of ways to make sure that I was meeting them where they were. And so while the general format of fellowship, dinner, and then equipping has remained the same, the topics that we are reviewing, the content, the depth that we're going, I try to make sure that we continue to go deeper. And another thing that is an obstacle for me that I'm continually trying to figure out is there is such a desire for me to personally disciple each and every one of them. You know, I think as a leader, it's hard to not want to just care for each of them. And, you know, with a group that has 18 to 22 people, most gatherings, that's just not really feasible or realistic from a bandwidth perspective. And so one thing is trying to really figure out how to raise up other leaders, how to look at it more from a structured standpoint, how to allow my husband to come alongside me in that as well. Yeah. And so I think that's a big thing.
What's a memorable or impactful moment that you may have witnessed? I mean, as I was thinking about this question, first thing that came to mind was like, you obviously met your husband through the young adults ministry.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I just stole your thunder there, but what is a memorable or impactful moment you witnessed as part of the ministry?
Yeah. Well, that definitely is a memorable one, I will say. I got to meet my husband on my front porch. He texted me one night, just this random person. He got my number from Chris McConaughey, so shout out to Chris for that setup. But just because he and his roommates had moved to town and they were looking to get plugged into Veritas and into a young adults ministry. So they showed up, him and his 4 roommates showed up on the porch one day. So I did meet my husband. But from a ministry perspective too, because that was a very beautiful personal thing that I was not expecting that happened. But, you know, as a leader of any group, I would say one measure of success is, are people hanging out outside of the group? You know, are they making relationships? And we, in the fall of 2023, went and we did a Yam in the Woods weekend where we rented a cabin in Red River Gorge and we caravaned down, and there were probably 12 to 15 people who were staying the whole weekend just as extra fellowship and getting out and enjoying nature. And I remember on our way down, we stopped for dinner at some fast food place. I don't even remember where, but in talking to one of the people who was coming, he was talking about his week and he said, yes, so-and-so, another person in the group, so-and-so and I just went to the Blue Jackets game last night. And I just kind of stopped in my tracks. And they were both rather new to the group, you know, within the last few months. And I said, did you know each other before this group? And they said, no, we just met. And he just said, yeah, he just reached out to me. He said, it was good meeting your group. I was wondering if you wanted to go to this hockey game. I have a couple tickets. And I had to try to not cry in the middle of, you know, a fast food restaurant with all these young adults, because it's a moment like that where you start to just see other people at the tables just kind of talking to each other. And you see that people are hanging out outside of the group. And that was just such a beautiful thing to me, because that meant that YAM was serving as a place where people could build fellowship with other young adult believers within Veritas. I've seen that play through in many other ways. I did meet my husband there. There are 2 other couples. One of them just got married, another getting married next month, that met at YAM. And not to say that they wouldn't have met at the church another way, but there, you know, are people who are now roommates. You know, a house of girls that has had several people from YAM kind of move in and move out, and just building these friendships in such a deep way. And so I think that when YAM starts to go beyond YAM, that's when things get really special.
Yeah. The faithful obedience of just opening up space for God to work. And that's so cool that people meet inside of YAM and then hang out outside of YAM. And I know it's like the same for community group a lot of the time, because relationship grows, but you need to have a space and the context for it to grow. And that definitely is a gift of yours to create that space.
Well, kind of shifting gears a little bit, you mentioned a minute ago that you're in church leadership as the deacon of young adults ministry.
Yeah.
So just from like a processing standpoint, like what is it like to go through the deaconship process, become one? What does that mean when you are a deacon?
Yeah. So most literally, the deacons are really the leaders of specific ministry. They're more so the boots on the ground, the people tangibly serving the body and leading in really practical ways. And so it's not necessarily that the church just has these open deacon positions and they're looking for people to apply. I think that our our pastors and elders are handling it in the best way, where they are seeing people who are already serving and leading in certain areas and then approaching them about turning that into a deaconship. And so I had already been leading YAM for about a year and a half when I was approached by Joe just to consider what being a deacon meant and if that's something that I would be interested in. And I made sure that I was sure that women could even be deacons, biblically. I even wanted to make sure that I could align there and really understand what a deacon is and read the Bible to understand the qualifications for a deacon, to make sure that I felt that I could, meet those and, faithfully, hopefully. And then it was about a year-long process of just praying about it, seeking counsel, talking with Joe about what it practically looks like to be a deacon. I started going to the church leader meetings with the pastors, deacons, ministry leaders, and staff, just to start understanding what those conversations looked like, what it looked like to come as a voice of the young adults at the church, and, just from being, hopefully a faithful servant of the church and member as well. And then I took a theological assessment, which was long, but I loved it because, again, I love biblical literacy. I love being able to talk through just what the Bible says on any given topic. And so I did that. And then after about a year, I believe the process was that Joe brought it to the pastors and elders just to make sure that there was a confirmation from them that they also believed that I would be right for this role. And then it was brought to the members just via an email, just to pass feedback, to make sure that the body also agreed, those who knew me, that this would be the right position for me. And I really am so thankful for that process. I am so thankful for a plurality of leadership. I'm so thankful for the members that it definitely feels like members can use their voice here at Veritas. I think that is really important because I, as a leader, it's extremely important for me to be held accountable. I want people to keep me in check. I want people to give me feedback if I am outside the Word of God. And I also need people to encourage me and support me in that. And so after that, I had a deacon commissioning, which is most literally where I was just able to go in front of the church and share the vision for YAM and then be prayed over as I was officially commissioned as the deacon. And then other than that, it really looks like me just continuing to faithfully serve the church as a leader with young adults, and then also continuing to go to the leadership meetings and be a voice in those venues.
I think it's really cool when you described how Veritas approaches deaconship. Instead of prescribing certain roles and then looking for people to fill them, or perhaps even kind of get them, a little bit of the way there. In some churches, that Veritas is on the lookout for the giftings that our members have, and just intuitively listening to the Spirit and who is coming to the church and what they're bringing. And I had read the new deacons email that came out maybe a month ago, and was just struck by all the really interesting, I don't remember the titles, but deacons of all sorts of different stripes. And I did have that thought, wondering was there a list of this before they put any one of these roles? But kind of doing it from the bottom up seems like a really interesting and more spirit-led way of identifying people's gifts and getting them into the leadership.
Yeah. And what a great job interview, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're already doing this job, so we should give it to you type thing.
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely. Good point. Yeah. I don't know how to ask this question, so I'm just going to try to feel my way through it.
Okay.
What do you think is a common question or maybe struggle or topic that you hear consistently through the people at YAM? What do they want to talk about the most? Is there a common kind of thread or topic or something that's on their minds? I don't know if that question makes sense.
It definitely does. And I think I'm trying to make sure that this sums everything up, but it really feels like it's all about relationships. I don't agree with this person and their views. How do I approach that? It's, hey, it feels awkward for me to share the gospel with people that I work with because of this, or this. Hey, I'm a single person and that might be something that I struggle with, or I just had a breakup, or, I'm dealing with this with some friends. And so it definitely feels like there's a lot of ground on different relational topics. I would say that's number one, way ahead of even what does the Bible say about these things. I think that makes sense, because what an effective strategy for the enemy to divide the church, where we as a church are supposed to strive for unity within the body, where we are to pursue reconciliation, where it is a gift that the church can look different to the world because of the relationships that we have with one another. So it doesn't surprise me that that's really one of the number one things I would say.
And it would make sense too that relationships, just as a broad category, are kind of front and center, because it's also lived experience. I mean, it's like that is the thing that you deal with day in and day out. Biblical literacy and, kind of a Christian worldview are obviously very important, but you want to know how to move and operate in the world.
Yes.
So I can see that being, primary.
Yes. Yeah. I'd like to go back to the deacon topic for just a second.
Yeah.
You mentioned before you became a deacon, you were reading the Bible and, first of all, trying to figure out if you felt you were qualified and called to that. And also you mentioned the question of women in leadership too. Do you mind expounding upon that a little bit, what you wrestled with as you considered this opportunity?
I will say, as a woman who likes to lead, that was something that pretty quick in my walk with Jesus I had to look into, because I think that the church has an outward reputation of not treating women well. And I didn't necessarily see that in the church. So that was something I had to look into, why do people say this? And I think it really comes down to the fact that in many churches, many Reformed Protestant churches, women aren't in the role of pastors. And after studying the scriptures and really open-handedly trying to pray through both of the sides of, really it comes down to just women as pastors and women teaching from the pulpit, I definitely landed with more it's the role of men to be in those leadership positions. And there's a podcaster I listen to, and she has a beautiful description for the godly view of marriage, that it's rooted in creation, reiterated through scripture, it's reflective of Christ and the church, it's repeated by Jesus, and therefore it's reflective of the gospel. And so to me, as we look at the narrative of scripture, those ties really point to me that men get to be in leadership roles. And I'm happy with that. I'm very happy to not be held accountable, in such big ways, still big ways as a church leader in general. But I'm really happy to, try to not idolize those positions of leadership and try to fall more into where it makes the most sense for me to come, as a woman in the church, who I've absolutely felt like I can still use my gifts in very big ways. And so holding that position and then trying to understand the difference between a pastor and a deacon was really important to me. The first deacons in the Bible were more so meant to care for, you care for the widows and the orphans. This is going to be your job there. And seeing that even the pronouns that they used or the way that they described the qualifications of pastors, elders, overseers, first deacons just differed a little bit. And reading commentaries by multiple theologians and honestly asking for godly counsel from pastors and from friends who I knew would have a point of view and praying about it. And once I felt like I landed in a place where it definitely felt like women could be deacons, and that was a beautiful role for them to have, then I was honored to take that role. So it's still a position in church leadership, and yeah, so that's how I landed there. And like I said, I'm really honored to have accepted that position.
Well, this has just been so illuminating to just like hear your heart, hear your story, see how God has obviously been using you and working in your life, but also using YAM in the church, and how all the rhythms are just kind of connected in this very particular way, and seeing just the testimony of people who have attended really is encouraging. I just want to thank you so much for spending time with us today on the podcast. And again, just thank you so much for just being consistently faithful with your passion and really being prayer filled, and trying to lead other people into what it looks like to be literate in biblical worldview, and to also like be equipped to be the body. So we couldn't do it with people without you. So thank you so much.
Thank you guys for having me and letting me share about things that I'm so passionate about. I would talk about this for 10 days, 12 days, the rest of my life if I could. So yeah, very much appreciate you guys.
Absolutely. If people want to get involved, how would they do that?
They can reach out to me. They can find me at church. They can reach out via the Connect QR codes that are on the back of the seats. You can find any pastor. All the pastors have my information, and just reach out to me directly. We'll tell you more about YAM if that's what you want to know, or we'll just have you come join a gathering and see it for yourself. So Excellent. Come and see.
Sweet. Yep. Thanks, Jess.
Thank you.
Well, that'll do it for us today on the Voices of Veritas podcast. Thanks, everybody, and see you next time.